Well, we have a really interesting reading today, and because the time we're looking at is a factor here, because when we're looking at the prophet Daniel, we're going to see him cover many, many years in a matter of seconds. So, for example, we began with the prophet Daniel, and he's part of the group that was captured by King Nebuchadnezzar. Well, now we are in the time of King Nebuchadnezzar's son. So, what's one of the things that happened? King Nebuchadnezzar discovers that Daniel has this ability to interpret dreams, and in doing so, he learns from Daniel that his kingdom will will not last. And there's an interesting aspect of that you can look at, in a sense, when we're talking about empires. Empires always believe they will exist forever, and they never do. Even the Roman Empire, we can honestly say. They don't exist forever. Their culture might, and we can clearly see elements of the Babylonian times. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite stories is that King Nebuchadnezzar, outside his palace, there was a street, and on that street there were these mosaic lions. I think there were 60 on either side of the street, and they would just line the street. Well, one of those mosaic lions is at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. So it's fascinating to see that. So elements of the empire still exist, but as Daniel makes it very clear to Nebuchadnezzar, his empire will fall. And he throws in that little dig. I don't know if he really intended to do that, but it is a little dig. And you fall to an inferior kingdom. Ooh, but he doesn't say who. Well, in today's reading, we're going to find who, but it's not to Nebuchadnezzar. It's to his son, once his son does something that is just absolutely well over the line. And considering we're talking about the Nebuchadnezzar family, that has to be pretty much over the line. So let's look at what's happening. And we might even be able to give some thought to what reaction would come out of this. So we are right now in Daniel. We're at a party that Nebuchadnezzar's son is doing. And in that party, they do something that is absolutely unacceptable. So we're going to learn about that. So what's happening here? First of all, remember I told you about time. Well, there's another time factor too. Remember this, according to the New American Bible Revised Edition, this book is written during the time of that reality that's leading up to the Maccabean revolt. So the pagans have taken over the temple, and the faithful Jews are looking at this and saying, what is our future here? Do we have a future? And they're very discouraged and they're very upset. Kind of give you a little story I can tell you later on in the program that would reflect that with some of what we've experienced here as Catholics. So they're really upset. And what we see here in this story is that during the reign of the son of Nebuchadnezzar, he has a party. And in that party, he uses the sacred vessels from the temple to use for his party as things to drink out of and everything else. Now, we've seen this formula before. And when we've seen it, it's not a good thing. That's when the Philistines stole the Ark of the Covenant. And when they stole it, they had it in their camp. They have this as their great prize, and they are cursed. Well, we find yet again, you use the sacred vessels of God for reasons why you shouldn't, you can expect a curse. Kind of an interesting story. Now, I'm not saying these people are cursed, but a lot of Catholics are very upset that in a scene in a TV show or a movie or something on one of these streaming channels, they had a scene where they made a mockery of Catholic sacramental vessels and stuff in a church. I'm not going to go into the exact detail because, first of all, I haven't seen the program. I won't watch the program for that reason. I mean, I won't watch any episode of the program. But you got to realize, in a sense, I have to be careful what I say here. There is a curse that goes with that. Now, I want to be careful of that because you might say, well, we as Christians don't believe in curses. Actually, we do. But in a whole different context. I can give you an example of a curse. The apostles have to, what do you call it? It's not, what's the word? Shake. That's the word I was looking for. Shake the dust from their feet. So the apostles have to shake the dust from their feet when they leave a town that rejects them and their message. And it'll go better for Sodom and Gomorrah than it will go for that town. That's a curse. There are such things as curses. So here they make a mockery of Catholic vessels and that. Well, just keep a close eye on that because there is a curse that's attached to that. And not saying the curse is going to happen, but it's something that you realize, I'm not going to do this. If you are part of the script of the movie, I'm sorry. There are certain things that I can do. There are certain things I can't. That's something I can't do. Absolutely not. And it's not because out of fear of retribution from God. It's out of reverence for God. So, and we hear these stories all the time. Well, this is what happens here. They make a mockery of the sacred vessels from the temple. And remember, it takes place in the 6th century BC, but it's written for those in the 2nd century BC who are witnessing the paganization, I guess you could use the word. Let's invent words just for the heck of it. Paganization of their temple. And it's kind of a saying that, don't worry, God witnesses and he knows when this stuff is happening. So what happens is Daniel recognizes this and he makes this pretty intense prediction. And what is the prediction? The prediction is not your kingdom will fall. It is your kingdom is going to fall to the Medes and the Persians. The other one was, well, there's this kingdom coming along. It's inferior to yours, zing, and your empire is going to fall. Now it is your empire is going to fall, and these are the people to whom it's going to fall to. And in fact, that happens. And we see that with Cyrus the Persian come in and conquering that whole kingdom, which is actually an empire, but they call it a kingdom. So you see that happening, this real intense reality that's there to comfort the people at the time of those events leading up to the Maccabean revolt and drawn from the time of the Babylonian exile. So we see all that coming together. And it's a powerful message for us. And I told you I was going to tell you a story a long time ago. This is back, it's back probably about 2002 or 2003. And a lot of people were very discouraged. Actually, even maybe 2004, extremely discouraged. The church was in the height of the crisis of the church. Here we are in Boston, Massachusetts, which was ground zero of the crisis on the church, the sex abuse crisis. And here we are, ground zero. And I am at a retreat that is being held by a man by the name of Dunga from Brazil. And it's a very powerful retreat. It's called the PHN retreat, PHN in Portuguese. And what it is, it's this great, powerful retreat for youth, meaning young adults, about living a life of holiness and turning away from sin. So, fascinating retreat. And there's about 200 Brazilian youth there. Again, youth in the Brazilian term actually means young adults in the English term. Brazilian young adults, I guess I'll say, from all over the East Coast, by the way. And they were there at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross, which was ground zero for the crisis in the church. Well, I needed to do something which I like to express called, I learned it from a friend of mine, I had to go buy money. What does that mean? It means I had to go to an ATM. So I wasn't part of the retreat. I was basically part of the staff that was of the cathedral that was helping them with the retreat. So anyway, I go to the local ATM, and as I'm walking outside the church, I see a group of 3 people praying around a statue of Our Lady of Fatima. Now, here's the interesting thing. Earlier in the day, the Brazilians were looking for a statue of Our Lady of Fatima. And we had a statue of the 3 children, but not of the Our Lady of Fatima. I literally said, the person told me that, how can you have the 3 children, not the statue? How can you do that? How can you have the statue with 3 children, not them? But anyway. Well, lo and behold, there they are praying around a statue of Our Lady of Fatima. And that's one of the things the Brazilians wanted to see. Just in general, a statue, not that one, a statue. So I walk out and these people are standing there and they're praying around the statue and they're very upset and they're very demoralized. And I said to them, they tell me their story, our church is falling apart, nothing's any good anymore, the whole bit, the whole crisis in the church. And I said to one of them, I said, could you come with me, please? So we start to walk around, we're on the outside of the cathedral, start to walk around the outside of the cathedral to come to the door. And as we go to the door, the man says to me, he says, am I in trouble? I said, oh, hardly. Let's come. So we go into the door, and he sees 200 youths celebrating the faith. And I said, here's the interesting thing. They want a statue of Our Lady of Fatima for their day, and you happen to have one. And he was shocked, and they were shocked. And now I go to the Brazilians after he says, yeah, sure, you can have this. I go to the Brazilians, and we say, guess who just arrived? Our Lady of Fatima. So it's a good example of how when people are really discouraged and down, God will care for them. God will take care of them, but in ways that they may not expect. And this is precisely what happened in this case. And this is also the story of what's going on with this. It's kind of a similar to the story of what we see going on. The message made to the people who are reading it at this time and hearing the message, and maybe not reading it, but hearing it from others, because a lot of people were literate, hearing from others is, yes, it may seem that we are in the midst of a lost battle, but don't think like that, because God is always reaching out. And remember what I've said, I don't know if I've said it here, but I actually said it before. God uses the enemies of his people to discipline and correct his people. Then he goes after the enemies of his people if they do not understand that they also need to reverence God. And so you're seeing that here with he used the Babylonians. You got to realize that the Jews, when they were captured by the Babylonians, were intensely evil. The things they were doing were beyond what you and I could imagine. The worst of all Americans doing today. Because among other things, they were sacrificing their children to Molech. Now, some would say, well, there's a way that still happens. Okay. Then that's not a good sign for us, as you can see. But as you see, they were sacrificing their children to Molech. They were worshiping other gods, all forms of idolatry, which we are forbidden from doing for exactly that reason. It leads you down these really horrible paths. And then he uses the Babylonians to correct the Jews. And then now we're seeing that the Babylonians didn't get the message that you've got to be careful when you're dealing with the God of the Jews. And if you don't reverence him, it's not a good thing. And so here they are mocking the God of the Jews. And what's happening? now all of a sudden you see this essential curse come in the reality that you see the scene. The scene is fascinating. We're going to talk more about it on the other side, where they're shocked by what they see. The Babylonians at this party with the son of King Nebuchadnezzar, King Belshazzar, and Daniel steps in because they call Daniel, and what does this mean? Oh, this is not good. And he explains, you're right. This is not good. And your kingdom will be divided by the Medes and the Persians. So be aware of it, and it will not go well. We'll be talking on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. And so we're talking about this powerful message. Now, what happens in the story, obviously you'll hear it when you're at daily mass, or if you read, you'll read it when you're reading the readings. It would remind you of the Addams Family. If you're familiar with the old TV show now, here's the one thing to keep in mind. I'm 67 years old. I remember the original running of the Addams Family. As a matter of fact, kind of a funny story. I was about, I think it came out in 64. So I was about 6. So there were a couple of guys, they were teenagers, and they were talking about this program they saw the night before. And one of the things I remember one of them saying, and of course they were 10 years older than me, they were talking about, this was so funny. There's this thing where they go, thank you thing, and there's this thing, this hand that's just there. Well, of course, that's Thing, who was one of the characters in the Addams Family. He's in the movies too, but the TV show I think had the best example of Thing, because he lived in a box and he was just a hand. Thing. So, and he wasn't the Thing, he was Thing. So in any case, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you all know this, the hand was actually Ted Cassidy's hand, and Ted Cassidy was the guy who played Lurch. Very tall, as the story goes. And he was Lurch, so he was Thing. In any case, that's kind of what you have here. You have Thing, in a sense, because you've got these fingers that are writing on the wall. Now, you've probably seen some of these ghost channels on YouTube, and they really kind of course, in a sense, I'm in the ghost hunting business. I'm really not, but if there are people that call me every time, do we have a ghost in our house? You might. I deal with that. That's what I deal with, so don't worry about it. Mostly with the those who come from the tropical areas, because there was a study and they found out that they're more open to understanding spiritual phenomena, whereas those in the northern, colder climates are like almost embarrassed to say that they have a ghost in their house. Oh, for God's sakes, it's a ghost. Get over it. That's what I want to say. But anyway, so I can't do that but you watch some of these channels and what do you see? Oh, and then the door opened by itself. It might be a ghost. Oh, it might be. There are ways to deal with that. Don't worry about it. Don't get all upset. But obviously, if you don't get all upset, the channels don't do well. I just keep watching. I watch these a little bit. I just get a kick out of it. Look, watch what happens. The window opens. Okay. Yeah. All right, if I have something that I'm afraid of in my house and I find out that the worst thing he's going to do is open up a window, I'm not worried. That doesn't bother me. Well, here you see something a little bit more terrifying. You see these fingers. Now we get into the scary world. These fingers writing and basically bringing upon this curse. Why? Because they mocked the sacred vessels. They mocked God himself. Always be aware of that. And, I got to be careful what I say, because people can misunderstand that or they can misinterpret it. These actors who did this, I guess it was on a streaming platform. I'm not going to say which one because I may have it wrong. But from what I understand, it belongs to a company that I don't follow anyway. I really could care less about that company. I'm going to tell you why. They have such intense account security that you lose your account if you make a mistake with your account security. And I'm like, I don't need a company that does that. So I lost a lot of my music because of their intense account security. And they basically said, if you forgot this, then you're done. There's nothing we can do for you. Okay, then I don't need to deal with this company anymore. Well, in any case, from what I understand, it's that company owns the streaming platform. And you saw reports of people making part of this script in this TV show, which obviously they did, made a mockery, in a sense, of the sacred vessels in a Catholic church. I don't know if there were people that danced through the aisles of another way we mock the Catholic Church in Hollywood. I don't know. But I want you to know something. If I was an actor and I took my faith seriously and I saw that in the script, I would say either get me out of my contract or change the script, because there's no way I'm going to do that. And maybe even bring out today's reading and go, don't. And that's an important distinction. So they're making a mockery and the fingers are writing on the wall. King Nebuchadnezzar just had dreams, and they were bad enough as it is. They have fingers writing on the wall. And the way it is written, it makes it clear it wasn't King Belteshazzar alone who saw the fingers, everyone who saw the fingers. And, maybe some of them misunderstood. You know how that goes. They misunderstood. Yeah, it was so cool. He had fingers writing on the wall. It reminds me of a true story. Someone who spoke to me one time. He says, do you have any of that holy water? I said, yeah, we have tons of it. Why? He says, well, I have a friend of mine who's got a bad knee, and he puts the holy water on his knee, and it's very warm, and that helps him. And I go, that's not a good sign. And he says, really? Because as you know, if holy water should be the exact holy water, if you have 2 glasses of water and they should be, and one is holy water, one is not, they should be the exact same temperature. And so when I said that, that's not a good sign. Something's wrong there. And yeah, that's true. I mean, there are real signs of don't turn, make sure you realize God is very much alive in our world today, and do understand that. There are plenty of people who will interpret signs as indicating, just as Friedrich Nietzsche said, God is dead. But if you know what Nietzsche's teaching is that God is dead, and because we made him irrelevant. Well, the fact is God is not dead. He's very much alive. And you can see signs every so often. One of the obvious signs, you can see the sun come up every day, but that's a different story. You can see signs occasionally that let you know God is very much alive in the world today. And don't worry. And that's the message that is being given to the people during the time of preceding the Macedonian, the Maccabean revolt. You're watching it, you're looking at it. Don't worry, God is very much alive. And, the signs are maybe not as obvious as they should be, but they are there. And do be aware of that. And this is that message that is there. So that little scene where, I'll just say it again. That little scene in this, which I haven't seen this TV show where they make a mockery of the sacred vessels, apparently, or even the Eucharist in a Catholic church. Hey, if I wasn't a priest, if I was just an actor who maybe took my faith seriously, because obviously I didn't take my faith seriously, I could care less, but just an actor who took my faith seriously, I would literally say that either let me out of my contract, we'll figure a way out, or you change the scene, because there's no way I am ever going to be connected to that scene. And we saw some of that last week, some of that same principle last week. There's no way I'm ever going to be connected to that scene. And there's no way, even if you get a stand-in to do it, I'm not going to do it. And I'm not going to be part of the because this is unacceptable. But I probably would have read the script ahead of time and said, no, there's no way I'm going to be part of this. And so you recognize it. It's kind of like what I also teach about Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. If you take a course and they teach out of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, well, the dedication is to Lucifer and talks about emulating Lucifer. If I was a serious Catholic in that class, which obviously I'm a serious Catholic, but I'm not in the class. In that class, I would say, I'm not going to take this class. Not if your main text here is calling people to emulate the devil to get what they want. That doesn't make any sense. Really something. You can't emulate the very symbol of evil in order to create a just society. But people don't get that very common sense message. We'll be right back right after this. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Are you looking for guidance on how to live a purposeful and transformed life? Look no further than Romans 12, a chapter in the New Testament that offers practical wisdom for believers. Romans 12 begins with a powerful call to offer our bodies as living sacrifices to God, urging us to renew our minds and align them with His will. This chapter highlights the importance of humility, using our gifts for the benefit of others, and exercising genuine love. It teaches us to be diligent in serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, and being devoted to prayer. But it doesn't stop there. Romans 12 also teaches us to live in harmony with others, extending kindness and hospitality even to our enemies. It urges us to overcome evil with good and leave vengeance to God. So if you're seeking guidance on how to live a life of love, humility, and service, dive into Romans 12. Let its practical wisdom transform your life. Romans 12, a chapter that offers a roadmap to living a purposeful and transformed Christian life. Available now in the New Testament. Get your copy today. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and tomorrow we have that interesting story about Daniel in the lion's den. And again, it's this principle that comes out every so often where people define a rule. And, the kings come out and they make a rule, and then they don't think through how their rule will be used. And this is something all legislators need to know. Yeah, if we do the X, Y, and Z, and then people will do A, B, and C using the rule, well, we don't want that to happen. So how do we prevent A, B, and Z from happening? And we're going to see that. We saw that last week in the Maccabean Revolt. We saw the king actually begging people to just eat the pork, even bribing them, because he didn't want to see them tortured to death. But he's the one that put this rule together, and there was no way in his mind that he could rescind the rule, even just correct it a bit. Okay, this thing didn't work out. We wanted to have this peaceful society by bringing all these religions together, and now we got people who are refusing to do that, and these other people think that I actually wanted to see them tortured to death for not eating pork. People are going to be talking about me for millennia and considering me this gross, evil human being. I'm not that bad. Well, yeah, actually you are. 3,000 years later, we're still talking about your evil. Anyway, we're going to see that same principle tomorrow. Anyway, have yourself a blessed day, and we will see you then. The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.